Sometimes in life we just suffer. Sometimes it's from being totally withdrawn, or so much stress that we are totally anxious, or so tired that we are totally burnt out. But our current position is not our final destination. No, indeed. There's hope. So whether it's your personal life, your career, your relationship, your business, or your job, we say there's reason to believe again. And we present from Andy's personal development, the breakout room. It's the place for health, happiness, and prosperity. Stay tuned for more. Hi, and welcome to the Breakout Room. We are live and we welcome you to this wonderful episode while we look at the three aspects of life based on what we do here from Andy's personal development. It's entitled Health, Happiness, and Prosperity. Today's episode will be Defining Success with Amber Fuhriman, and she is live with us in the studio. So let me give you a quick introduction while she gets prepared to come with us as she brings us the value and the content that's going to deal with how she defines success and how it can make a difference in your lives today. Amber Fuhriman is an attorney, author, speaker, success architect, and podcaster. She's the owner and attorney at Fuhriman Law in Las Vegas, Nevada, and she practices criminal defense and immigration law. Amber's road to becoming a success architect began in 2016 when she dug into personal development. Since 2016, Amber has pushed the boundaries of her self imposed physical and mental limitations, living outside her comfort zone as much as possible, and learning about how the mind works and how our limiting beliefs affect our success. So, there is so much more that she has accomplished, but we're going to let Amber take the spotlight as we introduce her live in the breakout room. Let's welcome Amber Fuhriman. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm so
Ah,
grateful to be here.
thank you for joining us and for being here. And we appreciate you and we appreciate what you're going to share with us today. I'm excited about the term success architect. I think everybody has within their imagination or their opinion what success would look like, one way or the other. But architect, it's so wide and so varied. How would you define success architect based on what you have done and what you have accomplished? And what are the tools that someone need to become a success architect?
Yeah, so the reality is we create the life that it is that we want to have. And a lot of times we do that blindly. We
Mm,
go into life so unintentional, almost 100% of the time. And if we're not incredibly intentional about what it is we want, the purpose for us wanting it, and how it is we're going to create it, then we will run off course. So when I was adjusting my role in life from attorney to coach, I didn't really resonate with the word coach. And I stepped back and thought, what is it that I actually do for people? And I grew up in a family where my dad built houses for a living, and I could remember him sitting with CAD software when it first came out. We're talking 1995-ish, 96-ish, and so computers were
yeah.
new, CAD software was new, And I could remember him just playing around with, where do I want to put this wall, and how is this blueprint going to look, and what is it that I want to build? And when I
Right.
started digging into helping people define success, I found incredible similarities between the way that an architect lays out the plans for a building and the way that a person should lay out their plans for their life. And so, if we think about it this way, if you're going to go buy a brand new house, if you're going to have a house custom built for you and for your family, and if you hired somebody to build this house and they showed up one day with construction workers and a couple of two by fours and a hammer, and they started nailing things together before you had seen a blueprint,
Ah,
what do you think are the
mm,
chances that you're going to feel safe in that house?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But we do that with our life every day. We wake up without a
Mm,
plan. We go through life without intention. We work for things that we don't understand the purpose of working for them for. So when I started looking at what is it that I actually want to do for people, I want to be the architect that helps them design the blueprint for their dream life, business, and
right,
future,
right.
and then
Yeah.
teach them how to be the architect of it moving forward. Because I don't believe that anybody, I believe that people should always work with a coach. I think coaches are always incredibly important. I don't believe that
Yes.
relying on a coach is healthy.
Mm, I
So I
get
think
that.
that
Thank you for sharing, Amber.
the more
Yeah.
tools I can give them so that they can become the
Hmm.
architect of their life, the more that we can then work together to build something incredible instead of them feeling like they need me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does make a lot of sense. As coaches, we are always taught and reminded that we are the ones that hold the hands of our clients or coachees, and we lead them to a path that they should think about. We show them different aspects of the same story that they've been telling themselves so that they can make a choice, one that would define, okay, you know what? Maybe I need to look at it from a different lens, from a different perspective. But certainly, the aspect of what they're looking at is always something new. But they have to make their minds up as to whether they want to go in that direction or not. It's our duty to just point them in that direction. So I get it. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for sharing.
Of
Amber, what
course.
was the defining moment for you when you decided to make that paradigm shift? Because I'm sure you would have had certain levels of success within the law fraternity. But there was a shift that took place. And then you decided to get into coaching. You got certified and certified. And of course, there was something, maybe a moment that you realize, hey, you know what? I just need to do something so much more than I'm doing because maybe I need to redefine myself. What was that moment like for you from an emotional perspective?
Yeah, there's a few. I don't think that there's one defining moment. There's a few of
Right.
them that come into play for the different changes that I've made. The big one,
Mm-hmm.
though, was that I had tied my
Mm-hmm.
self-worth and my definition of success to a particular outcome in the legal profession. So I
Ah.
come from a ton of trauma in my life. And for a
Mm-hmm.
long time, I didn't want to admit that because my life was very good. So for me to say that I came from trauma felt inauthentic because I look at
Yeah.
people who came from true trauma, abusive families and unstable environments, and I look at that and I say, "That's trauma. What was mine?" And the reality
Mm.
is that I suffered from an incredible amount of loss in my life. Between the ages of 7
Right.
and the age of 18, I went to 10 different funerals. One of those was my father at the age of 18, who was killed in a work-related accident, and I never
Wow.
really understood or appreciated how much those events shaped me and my mindset. Specifically, the belief that people weren't gonna stick around, so why should I care, and why should I build relationships, and I could
Mm.
just go it alone, and I didn't need to rely on anybody, and I
Yeah.
became a loner, but I also became a loner that's very social, and that's a weird dynamic to have. I wanted people around me, but I didn't want them to think I needed them or
Yeah.
wanted them
Yeah.
around me. So I never dealt with any of the trauma because I convinced myself that none of it was going to matter when I reached a certain level of success. And for me, that success was a six-figure income and a law degree. So I put my head down, I worked hard, and in
Right.
2016, I hit my first six-figure income. And I sat there and waited because this was that magical moment that in my head I had created. I expected um, champagne and confetti, and I expected magic fairies to come take away all of my trauma that I didn't want to deal with. And it didn't work that way, as you can imagine. Instead, I started
Mm.
suffering from
Yeah.
really bad panic attacks and anxiety attacks. And looking back,
Wow.
the reason for that was because I didn't know how to show up. The reason that I
Hmm.
was able to work so hard was because in my head, A plus B equals C. In my head, working hard and having a six-figure income equaled the trauma no longer hurting and me feeling successful and being happy. And when
Right.
it didn't work that way, I didn't even know what way is up. So it started with me going to therapy just to quite literally teach myself how to breathe again. And
Hmm.
that's when I found obstacle course racing, which you mentioned in the intro a little bit. I found obstacle course racing, and it was really obstacle course racing that first showed me that I had been holding myself back, and that was through physical
Okay.
endeavors. I would push myself on an obstacle course over and over again. For a year and a half, I ran about 26 obstacle course races and ended with a 24-hour endurance race. And it was through that 18 months that I taught myself really how strong I was. And then that translated into the professional setting and led to me opening my first business, which was my law firm.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And so you were quite vulnerable, and we heard the passion in your voice, and we appreciate that, Amber. Thank you very much. In
Of
terms of the
course.
people that you deal with from a coaching level, what are some of the challenges that they bring to you that you think or you believe or you have seen could work negatively with regards to the impact of success in their lives?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest problem comes when it comes to success and feeling unsuccessful. It comes from simply not defining it. I mean, that was definitely my problem
Mm.
when I went to my therapist for the first time and I was convinced I didn't need therapy. And then 6 months later into the therapy I didn't think I needed, I told her
Uh-huh.
that I felt like such a failure. All I'd ever wanted in my life was to be successful, and I felt like such a failure. And I will never forget
Mm.
her looking at me and saying, you're an attorney, you're the first person in your family to go to law school. You went on, or I'm sorry, you're first person in your family to go to college. You went to law school, you have a six-figure
Hmm.
income, you're respected in the community, you live in a city where you didn't know anybody before you moved here, you're self-independent, you take care of yourself, you don't rely on anybody else. What exactly does success mean to you? And I said, I don't know. Nobody's ever asked me that question before. Um, so that was kind of the beginning of the question for me. And then I opened my law firm in 2017 and quickly realized that I didn't know how to run a business. And I started networking with business owners. And through that, I found much of the coaching work that I now coach and train in Vegas. So from 2016 to 2020, I was just focusing on being a better attorney. And the more that I
Uh-huh.
learned about myself, the more that I learned about the process, the more that I defined success for myself, the more I realized that my identity no longer depended on me walking into a courtroom every single day. And instead, I got so much more joy and
Mm.
fulfillment out of helping other people separate their self-worth from their external accomplishments and start to actually build the life that they want to have. Because it doesn't matter if you're chasing a family, a relationship, a six-figure income. It doesn't matter what you're chasing. If you are wanting to accomplish it because you think it is going to solve a problem in your life that you're unwilling to address now, you're gonna crash every single time. Success
Hmm.
cannot
Yeah.
solve something. You're still gonna have to deal with the trauma that you think success will fix. So for me, when I have somebody come to me that wants more success, I am always very intentional and still sometimes surprised at how somebody can come to me and say, I want more success. And I'll say, great, what does success mean? And they're like, I have no idea. Cool. So, how can you have
Wow.
more of something that you don't know what it is?
That you don't. Yeah. 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 Wow. Indeed. I'm reminded of a quote by a famous golfer. He's no longer with us, Arnold Palmer. He once said, "The road to success is always under construction." And that
Yes.
is so instructive in terms of how some people see success and how they understand and define success. And so it leads me to think, is there something that we can show people? And of course, they would have the option to choose. But if there's one thing that they can do to take control of their life and to define their success, would there be one thing that they can do that would help them to reach that conclusion?
I think there's two. So, I'm going to give you two
Uh
because
huh.
they go hand in hand.
Right.
Um, the first is, and I'm so sorry for everybody that's listening because you're not going to want to hear it. And it is the starting point for every ounce of success that you'll experience in your life. The
Hmm.
first thing that we get to do is stop blaming other people for our results. The first
Right.
thing that we get to do is to stop being the victim in our lives. The first thing that we
Hmm.
get to do is to stop thinking that life happened to us and start
Yeah.
realizing that everything that has happened in our life has happened for us to learn something, to realize something, or to become something. So
Okay. Yeah.
when we start on this journey, we can only go so far without being willing to take 100% responsibility for our results. And that means that anytime you hear yourself say the word because, or anytime that you hear
Mm.
yourself say the word except, like, I was going to do this, but, or I was going to make some sales calls today, but I didn't because all of that is complete
Mm.
and utter bullcrap. So the reality
Yes.
is you were going to make sales calls and you didn't, and you didn't
Hmm.
because of you. And the moment that you acknowledge that, I'm not saying stuff doesn't happen in your life. What I am saying is that if we don't take responsibility for the fact that we chose to focus on the thing that derailed us instead of the thing that we wanted to do in the first place, then we will always be a victim to our circumstances. So, the very first thing to do is to
Right.
start hearing yourself and the places where you make excuses and where you deflect responsibility for your results onto somebody else. Hand in hand with that goes the second thing, and that is to really define success for yourself. So, for all of my clients, I start with a tool that's pretty common in the coaching industry. So, I'm sure that you're aware of it, Andy. I I work with the life wheel, and it looks like a Trivial Pursuit
Yes.
piece. And
Hmm.
it really helps people start to identify the areas in their life that they feel out of harmony. I don't believe in work
Right.
life balance. I don't think it exists, and I think it's harmful to try to create it. If we if we're trying to create work life balance, we are by definition separating our life from our work, and we are not two separate people, so that's impossible. Instead, what we get to do is look at our life as a harmony that includes all of the areas of our life, like our work and our money and our relationships and our spirituality and our health and all of them. And so when we do this life wheel exercise, people get very clear about the areas that they've been ignoring in their life. And then from there, we can set very specific goals to make intentional changes in somebody's life based upon the areas of their life that they want to see the most improvement.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you for defining that really, really, really clearly, Amber. We appreciate that. So,
Of
in
course.
terms of the process of learning, there is a difference between learning and being a forever student. How do you define that? The difference between someone who's always learning and someone who's always being a forever student?
I love this question, first of all. And I think that it's dangerous because learning, in order for us to truly know something, in order for us to truly learn something, we have to, at some point in time, execute that thing, learn from our failures, and then execute again. And so for
Okay.
me, when somebody looks at me and says, I'm a forever student, when you were a student, think about what it was like when you were a student. How much action was involved in being a student in a classroom? So people sit there and they take in information. They go to conferences and they take in information. They work with coaches and they take in information. And they say things like, I'm a sponge, or I love learning, or I'm a forever student. And what that tells me is that they are constantly taking information in and they are never getting energy or action out. Because I actually
Mm-hmm.
did this with a client of mine because she kept saying, like, I was looking at her in a training environment and she would look at me with the, kind of this blank stare, and I would say, are you good? And she says, well, yeah, I'm just a sponge. And so I had one of my coaching assistants go across the street to like a Walgreens or a CVS and get a sponge for me. And then I grabbed a cup of water and I put the sponge in there and I let it soak up water out of a cup. And I showed it to her and I said, how useful is this sponge if it just sits there and soaks up water? If you just leave it, if you never wring it out, if it never gets used, if it never gets put into action, it becomes mildewy and you end up throwing it away because it becomes moldy and it becomes
Yeah.
stagnant. In order for us to truly be learners, there is an action requirement that is how we truly understand things.
Mm-hmm.
Students take in and never use.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. So someone in the audience give you a
Well,
thumbs
I'm
up
glad to
for a
hear that. I'm
like.
glad it
So I
resonated.
know. Yeah, I we would appreciate your comments and your questions as well. Amber seems to be so very comfortable in expressing the value that she's brought to the show. So please tell us what your thoughts are, as well as any questions you may have. I'm sure she'd be only too happy to respond. So Amber, I'm thinking about alignment, and as a an attorney and someone who defends people and so on, how much of an alignment do you see between that aspect of your life and the coaching?
How much alignment is between my law firm life and my coaching life?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I want to make sure I understand your question. What do you mean by alignment?
Hmm. Okay, for example, is there a spillover from one to the other? Does one complement the other?
Hmm.
Or
Okay.
do you find yourself having to cut off from one in order that the other can take its place?
Yes and yes, all of the three. So, um, when I started coaching, I got very stuck in this who am I to be coaching person? I've never been a coach before.
Right.
And my coach, lovingly and maybe not so gently, reminded me that I had been a criminal defense attorney for 9 years at the time that I
Mm-hmm.
started coaching. And
Mm-hmm.
if I believed that I never had to coach a client in my law firm, then I must have been a horrible attorney. And I
Wow.
stepped back and I thought, you know what, you're right. Every single time that I talked about a client, about working through a defense or preparing them for trial or how to communicate well when they were in a courtroom, I was coaching them. So there are skills that I learned as an attorney that cross over and become incredibly valuable in the coaching industry.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
bring so much of the ability to stand in front of somebody and cross examine them, the ability to go toe to toe with somebody in a courtroom. There are times where we as coaches have to go toe to toe with our clients' bullcrap, with their excuses. We can, if we're going
Yes.
to let them or help them take action, sometimes it requires us to use the language that we know to be verbally forceful to show them how dug into their excuses they are. And if a client came to me and said, Amber, I really wanted to make some networking meetings this week, but I just didn't have time. And if I said, well, I get it, time's a problem for me too. What type of coach am I? I get to go I get to go toe to toe with that client to say, well, let's talk about time. What did you do today? And when they say, well, I was just so swamped, it's my favorite. My favorite thing is when a client tells me they don't have enough time in the day, because then I start making them send
Mhm.
me a rundown of everything that they did every moment of their day
Uh-huh.
for a week. And it is normally day 3 when I get the message from them that says, fine, I get the point. How much time did you spend on Facebook when you didn't have time to go networking? How much time did you spend, doing things that didn't move your needle forward in your business when you didn't have time to go networking? Those are all skills that I became very comfortable with as an attorney. The areas that I felt the need to step back go back to the first piece of advice that I gave in one of the prior questions, which comes down to personal responsibility. It became
Hmm.
really, really hard for me to walk into courtrooms with people that weren't ready to take responsibility for their actions and reconcile that with this coaching world where my job is to get somebody to take responsibility for their actions. Sometimes in a courtroom with criminal defense, I don't get to the point where the client takes responsibility for their actions. As long as they stay out of prison, they're happy. And they don't necessarily want their life to change. They just don't want to go to jail. And it became
Right.
energetically draining for me because I was out of alignment with that mentality. So I would get frustrated with how can I spend my time and effort in this world when I know the impact that I can make over here with somebody who wants results. So for me, it was my internal lack of alignment that caused me to really make the change.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Amber. We appreciate that and we appreciate you. So, you have been listening to Amber Fuhrman as she expresses her expertise and her experience with regards to defining success and how it can become a possibility for those who are willing to put in the time, the work, and the effort. We will take a short break at this time and we'll listen to something from one of our patrons and supporters. We'll be right back with Amber in a brief moment.
Hi, friends. Phoebe Trotman here. I wanted to just thank Andy Charles and the team for what they're doing with their broadcast. One of the things that stood out to me is that they truly care. They are there every single Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time, sharing what they have gone through, their experiences. They have guests who have gone through real challenges, and those guests are sharing what they've done to push through those challenges. And but one of the things the reason I want to encourage you to tune in is because it helps you realize you're not alone. There is a community of people who care. There are people out there who've gone through challenges and they're sharing what they did to push through. And so it's a show of hope. It's a show of encouragement. It's also a show where you can learn. You can learn a tip or two to help you along your journey. So I encourage you again, tune in every single Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time. They have a great lineup of guests. They themselves, they share their experiences, and I know it will help you through your journey. So I wanted to wish you continued success, good health, and many blessings in 2024 and beyond.
Yeah, thank you, Phoebe Trotman. So we'll be on at 6:30 p.m. AST. That's also Eastern Standard Time with our other podcast, Breaking Out of Depression. You can join us then later on. I have a comment that I must put up on the screen for you, Amber. It's from Anthony Maruri, a fellow coach and a public speaker, and he says, I agree, people don't want taking responsibility. Wow. Thank you for your comment, Anthony. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you, bro. So then, Amber, how do we encourage people to realize that life itself offers the opportunity for them to actually take responsibility for their actions and ultimately the results that follow?
Yeah, so I think that the biggest thing is identifying the places that they're not. And it's not always easy, right? We don't always know when we are, I'm going to use the word playing the victim. I realize that might be very harsh, so please know it comes from a place of love. I mentioned this in my book that writing, when I wrote the book, a lot of the book's story is about my relationship with my mom and what I learned from that. And my mom and I had a very tumultuous relationship growing up. And I thought that I had
Wow.
healed from
Mm.
it, and then I wrote the book. And if you think that you've healed from something, write a book about it and you will find out how wrong you were.
Ah,
So,
yeah.
when I wrote the book, I realized that many of the things that I had taken that my mom had said to me and I had internalized as a lack of love or support or whatever I internalized it as, that I was so tied to being a victim to my dad's death, to the losses that I had experienced in my life, to the things that I had felt like hadn't worked out in my favor. I was so tied to being a victim for that. And every victim needs a villain. And my mom was the villain that I created in my life. And so there were a lot of times where, even when I had done the work, and even as a coach, and even when I was making progress, that I didn't realize the areas in my life that I was still not taking responsibility. So I think it takes a strong coach on the other end to continually poke and prod you, to find out, like, are you aware of the fact that you're not taking responsibility for this right now? Do you hear the excuses that you're deploying that are preventing you from having these results? One of my favorite phrases is, when you're part of the problem, you can't be part of the solution. And so many people think, I'm
Hmm.
going to figure this out on my own. And then once I have it figured out, I'll go get help on how to implement something different. Well, we never get to that second stage because you cannot solve a problem that you created without outside help.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow. That's revealing. Thank you for sharing with us, Amber. I look at success, and for me personally, I have seen some levels of success in my life. And as I focus on the future, I think sometimes I probably set goals that some people would think are maybe too ambitious.
Good,
But
because
for
it's not
me,
their
it's
life.
exactly. But for me personally, it's an opportunity for me to put my desire, my level of ambition to the test. And sometimes it's hard explaining that to folks. They say things like, don't hang your hat too high where you can't reach. And, you know, but I tend to shy away from stuff like that because I don't believe in looking at limitations. I believe in looking at strengths. When you deal with your clients and they come to you seeking, as you said before, some of them cannot even define what success is, but they want more success. How do you help them to gauge the level of commitment that they need to make to the success that they eventually decide they want to accomplish?
Yeah, well, I don't think that the level of commitment changes.
Uh huh.
So the level of commitment is the same, whether what you define success
Yeah.
as is living in a van and traveling around the world,
Hmm.
or whether you define success as being the CEO of a multi-billion dollar company. Both of
Right.
those things require the same amount of commitment. So what it
Hmm.
really comes down to is that we're constantly fighting between what it is we want, what it is we say we want, what it is that we think other people want us to want. And so oftentimes when people come to me and they say, I have a goal, I want to make six figures or I want to make seven figures, when I start asking them questions about what the purpose is for them wanting to have that, it always comes down to I want to create a better life for my kids, or I want my mom to be proud of me, or I want somebody else, I want my husband to look at me and fall back in love with me. Like, very rarely do they look at me and say, I want to be proud of myself, right?
Ah,
So
yeah.
the reality is that what people normally realize is that they're setting goals based upon what somebody else wants for them, not what they want for themselves, because they've never asked themselves what they want. Because for the majority of us, I don't know where your listeners are from, and cultural differences matter. So I think that this is pretty standard through most cultures, although on different levels. Here in the US, for example, I was raised all the time saying, don't talk about your successes. It's braggadocious. Don't talk about how much money you make. We don't talk about religion. We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about money. Well, religion, politics, and money are three of my favorite conversations now, because I learn a lot
Uh-huh.
about people and how they handle discomfort in their life. So if somebody comes to you and they're on a different political spectrum than you, or a different religious spectrum than you, or a different money spectrum than you, and your response is to shut down instead of have a decent conversation, then when you go
Yeah.
talk to your
Yeah.
client and they don't believe that your product, service, or solution is valuable, your response is going to be to shut down to that client.
Mm,
Our
yeah.
job as our job as salespeople, and every single one of us is a salesperson. If you think you're not, check everything in your life. I heard somebody once pull his wife out on stage, and he says, people said that I'm not a salesperson. How do you think I got her to marry me? 'Cause she was gorgeous.
Wow.
He's like, I definitely married up. And he's like, I have to sell my kids to get out of bed every day in the morning. Like, everything
Wow.
that we do in our life is sales, it's
Mm-hmm.
influence, it's communication. And we
Yeah.
cannot do that if we're so stuck in the fact that what we believe is correct. So that when we teach sales communication leadership, we teach it from the aspect of, you don't have to agree with the other person. You don't even have to believe that what the other person says is true or possible. You do, however, have to believe that they believe it's possible in order to have a
Mm, yeah.
conversation. If you can then
Yeah.
step into a model of the world where they believe that what they're saying is possible, then you can start to step back to a place where you can find agreement. And this is just communication 101. So regardless of whether you're talking about selling your product and service or getting your kid to eat broccoli, there it's the same, right? So this is the same when it comes to success and communication. When I'm talking to a client and we're talking about what it is they want, most people come to me because they want to make more money.
Yeah.
And then when I
Yeah.
start asking them what it is they want more money for, because I've never met anybody who wants $1 million so that they can push around a wheelbarrow full of $1 million. They want $1 million because they think it's going to do something for them. And normally it won't. Normally, we get to find other ways to create
Yeah.
the feeling of success, and then the money will come. So, the questions and the conversations I have with my clients really come down to, do you really want what you say you want? Who do you want it for? And what is the purpose of you wanting it? Because if we can start to identify those three things, we can really start to figure out what it is that has been holding them back.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Amber. We appreciate that. Are you involved in any mentorship, any mentoring program, even if it's with some nonprofit organizations or schools that are in the area, looking at the younger people who are looking to make career choices, career decisions, and you're involved in some program that is helping them to see the other aspect of life based on the fact that they're looking to a future that would in some way bring them some level of success? Are you involved in any programs like that from a mentoring perspective?
Yeah, I do work with some local schools speaking at different levels of education. Um,
Come on, internet, behave yourself. Wow. I lost her there. What an amazing thing. My guest was 1 minute here and she is just gone. Wow, the technology. So I asked her a question concerning mentoring, and she was just responding that she is working with some young people in the area. I hope that she's able to get back into the studio uh, so that we can continue this amazing conversation. And we just have about 5 minutes or so left on the record to wrap up this episode of the breakout room with Amber Fuhrman defining success. I hope that she can get back into the breakout room so that we can finish this dynamic and amazing conversation. In the meantime, I really want to thank those who, yeah, yeah, that's right. Things do happen, boy. Things do happen, and life is like that. It happens, and when it happens, we just have to manage ourselves within the context of how it happens because we have no control over it. So we just got to go with the flow sometimes or find a way to deal with it. As I said before, just manage ourselves in the opportunity that it may present for us, either to learn something, to gain something, and even sometimes to lose something, because sometimes we have to free ourselves of the unnecessary weight that we take on in this life that can certainly make a difference in our lives. So while I don't know what is happening with Amber on the other side, I do know that I just have a few minutes to go. So I'm going to try to use that as much as I possibly can. Hopefully, she can get back in. If not, well, I have no control over that. But here's the thing that I'm looking at lately. Oh, there she is. She is back. Let me see if I can add her to the stage. Whoa. Oh, you're
You're muted.
muted.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay.
Wonderful.
But I've got
We,
echo. Hold on. Okay, how about now?
yep, that's wonderful. That's good. That's really good. We were wondering what's happening with Amber. We lost you for a moment.
There we go. So sorry about that.
That's all right.
Ah,
Oh, there it goes again.
I. There we go.
So Anthony
How's that?
says things do happen. Yeah. Don't
Yes,
worry
I'm
about
so
it.
sorry about that. I got kicked out and I didn't know what happened, and then it took me a minute to get back
Yeah.
in. So,
Don't.
um, I don't. So I was mentioning that you had asked me about mentorship, and I was
Yeah.
mentioning that I
Yeah.
did. I do speak at different levels of education regarding mentorship. The interesting thing, I had the incredible opportunity of having Les Brown on my podcast a little while back. And I remember asking him a question because he does so much mentoring. And I asked him, like, I know when I was a kid, if somebody had told me that a six-figure income wouldn't be enough for success, I would have thought they were out of their damn mind. So, at what point is it too early for us to start talking to kids about success? Because they're not going to listen anyways. They've got it all figured out, right?
yeah.
When I was 14 or 15, I knew
Right.
everything. Nobody needed to tell me anything. I was all knowing. And he said something that changed my perspective on mentorship. He said, I don't think that there is ever a moment that is too early because when they're ready to listen, everything that they have heard up to that point is going to be stored somewhere in their unconscious mind for when they are ready to finally hear it and take action on it. And so I think one of the most frustrating things about speaking to kids is wondering whether you're getting through to them. And the reality is, all we can do is pour our heart and soul out to them. And it is on them to determine when it is that they're going to choose to listen. But that doesn't mean we stop talking.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds really good. I love that concept. It makes a whole lot of sense. And thank you for sharing. I do listen to Les Brown a lot, and I focus most of the times on the earlier stages of his career and some of the challenges that he had to deal with and how he overcame those challenges. I think the mindset and the heart set then was really important. You okay?
Yep, I'm good. I apparently just tried to
Oh,
choke on
she's
my water.
okay.
Sorry about that.
That's
Um,
okay. That's okay.
yes,
So
I love Les
go
Brown,
ahead.
and he has had an incredible career.
That's correct. That's correct. So, Amber, we're about coming to the end of the program. This has been a wonderful episode. Um, I love taking my guests to a place where they become really philosophical. And there are two more questions that I really want to ask. And the first one has to deal with when you look at what is happening in the world today in terms of the wars, economies. Whenever you turn on the news or you look at the press or you listen to the radio, it seems to be more negative than positive. We had to deal with COVID recently. There are so many things happening with regards to disease and disease control. We're looking at cancer still existing, heart disease. If there's one thing that may be considered as a pet peeve that you think we should not deal with, what would it be for you?
Mm, this is an interesting question for me because my law practice focuses on immigration as well as criminal defense. So it's always
Yeah,
politically charged.
right.
And I get very frustrated by it. I don't watch a lot of news. Um, I don't listen to a lot of radio. I listen to very intentionally curated playlists on
Yeah.
Spotify or other streaming
Mm-hmm.
platforms. I'm very aware of what it is that I allow. We're constantly being programmed by the things around us. So I'm very aware of the things that I allow to make it through my filters of into my mind. If it's not going to affect me or my family or how I'm going to show up, um, I get very intentional about it. I think that I think that there's a couple of different answers to your question. The first is if we believe that for the most part, which I do, that people are good, then we must also believe that the things that they are fighting for are because they think that that is what will most benefit the world and people. And when
Yeah.
we look at it like that, then we can get to a place of disagreement. And I think that getting to a place of disagreement is healthy. We have lost the ability to calmly disagree with people as a society. And instead, when somebody says something that differs from our opinion of what we think makes the world good, we often resort to personal attacks about their character or who they are as a person. So that is my lack of toleration. I will get into any conversation with any communicating with people who think differently than me. I love communicating with people who have different beliefs than me. I love communicating with people that are on the different side of aisles of issues on all across the world. What I will not tolerate is personal attacks because the moment that it becomes personal, we have
Yeah.
lost sight of what we're disagreeing about. And now I need to protect myself and my energy from somebody who is no longer communicating in good faith.
Mm, yeah. Wow. Wonderful. And finally, if you had a mic that you can speak to almost 8 billion people on the planet, and it's the only thing that you can get to say to them, what would it be, Amber?
So I'm going to steal it from Brene Brown. I talk about her a lot in my book. She is a big part of my story. And she
Uh-huh.
has a quote that I lived with for a
Right.
long time. And that is that if you are not also in the arena getting your ass kicked, then I am in no way interested in your opinion. If, we all have different
Ah,
ideas and realities about what pushing ourselves and success looks like. And I'm not here to judge what somebody else defines as success. However, if somebody is complaining about their own life, is unhappy with where they're at in their life, and is unwilling to change it, yet they feel the need to tell me about how what I'm doing is improper, I have no desire to hear what they have to say.
I get that. I saw that TEDx speech when she made that statement, and it was quite riveting. So I see where you're coming from. Thank you so much, Amber. So we have been with Amber Fuhrman live in the breakout room, and she's been sharing so much wonderful nuggets and information on defining success. I'm sure there's been a wonderful amount of volume of stuff that you have gotten from this episode. So now we're going to just show on the screen some information. And Amber, could you tell them which is the most effective way they can get in contact with you if they need your services or some form of expertise that you offer as a coach?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go to my website, which is successdevelopmentsolutions.com, and you can see the access to the Facebook group, the podcast, all of the information is there. If um, if anybody is interested, I do have a free gift for the listeners of your show. So if they go to blueprint.successdevelopmentsolutions.com, there is a free download that they can have that includes the life wheel and a couple of pages on goal setting that will allow them to start to define success and take action. And so, if they're interested at all in that aspect, they can go get that free download and start making some small changes in their life.
Yeah, wonderful. Wonderful. So I just have one final comment from Anthony, and there it is.
Thank you
Thank you,
so much. I appreciate it.
Amber, for sharing. Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you for your comments and your continued support. So, folks, that's it. We have come to the end of this amazing episode. And we like to continue to remind you everything that you do, seek to always grow and develop in health, happiness, and prosperity. On behalf of my guest, Amber Fuhrman, we are saying so long, Godspeed, God bless, Shalom, Namaste. Bye for now, guys. Until next time.